Hi, this is Stephanie. Welcome to lesson number 57. This is a vocabulary lesson and our topic today is business. So my name's Stephanie, this is level B2 or upper intermediate, and we are on lesson number 57. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover today. So in lesson 57, you will increase language for introducing yourself in a business context. Consider what makes a good first impression. Expand vocabulary for describing career changes. And discuss key issues surrounding jobs and business. So as always with my lessons, there'll be lots of opportunity for you to practice. This is a vocabulary lesson, so I'm going to be asking lots of discussion questions where I'm asking you to think about what happens in your life, in your company, in your country. Okay, let's begin then with introductions. Let's think about first impressions. What things do you think can make a good first impression? What things do you think can make a bad impression? So I'd like you to pause the video here and just note down or just think in your head about perhaps your own experience when you've gone to a company. What has made a positive first impression on you, and what things have you thought have created a negative impression? So pause the video and just have a think about these two questions. Okay, well, let's have a look at some of my ideas. So these are some of the key areas that I think can either be very positive or very negative. So business premises and location. Now, obviously, depending on what type of business you are in, depends on whether perhaps you need to be in a more town centre location or whether it suits you to be in a business park. But obviously, having an official premises, having a good location can be very important when you're creating a first impression. What about reputation? Again, a really key area because this is something that your clients, your customers will know before they actually meet you. Greeting. Again, this can depend a lot culturally, but the initial greeting. What do you do in your culture? Do you shake hands? Do you kiss? What's a typical business greeting? Appearance. And again, this can depend on what type of business you are in. Some businesses are required to be very formal, and perhaps there's that expectation that you will be in a formal business suit. However, some businesses, maybe for example, if you're in something like IT, if you're in design, then it's much more normal to be in casual, trendy clothes. So again, appearance can make a positive or a negative first impression. And hospitality. Maybe you've experienced hosting guests in your company. What do you normally do? Do you provide lunch? Do you take them out for dinner? Is this an important part of creating that first impression? So these are just some ideas. There's lots of other areas that can be very important. And of course, you don't have to agree with my ideas. These were just some suggestions. Okay. So we've talked about what makes a good first impression and what can make a bad first impression, but think about your company. What do you think people imagine when they come to meet you at your company for the first time? What impression do you think your company gives? Again, we talked about this a little bit on the previous slide, but how important do you think culture is when you meet someone for the first time? We talked a little bit about the importance of being culturally aware when you're greeting someone. Different cultures have very different forms of acceptable greetings. And as in the picture, there's an illustration of business cards. Do people use business cards in your country? And do you think these are effective business tools? Maybe you have a business card. What information do you think a business card should contain? So just some questions there for you to think about. As always, if you'd like to send in some answers, you are very welcome to do so. Please email Perfectly Spoken. And if you put in the subject level B2 lesson 57, then I can check your ideas. Okay, so we've talked a lot in general, but what about you? If you're meeting someone for the first time, can you complete these sentences to make them true for you? So nice and easy. My name is, I work for, I work in the department. I've been there for years. Before that, and then perhaps something that you really enjoy about your job. Perhaps it's meeting new customers, perhaps it's the travel aspect, perhaps it's a sense of job satisfaction. But remember, it's always nice to be positive when you're meeting people, so telling them something that you really enjoy, that's very stimulating about your work, is a good way to make a first impression. Okay, we're going to have a look at a dialogue with some words missing, and what I'd like you to do is to complete the missing words. Let me introduce, my name is Anne Green. It's to meet you. I'm Tom Devon. To meet you, Tom. What department do you work in? Marketing. I'm in the Singapore office. What about you? I work in sales in the Sydney office. May I introduce you to my Tony? He also works in marketing. It's a pleasure to you, Tony. Are you enjoying the conference? 6 gaps there. So pause the slide for a moment and complete the gap with a suitable word. Okay, shall we check the answers? So the first one, let me introduce myself. My name is Anne Green. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Tom Devon. Nice to meet you, Tom. What department do you work in? Marketing. I'm based in the Singapore office. What about you? I work in sales in the Sydney office. May I introduce you to my colleague Tony? He also works in marketing. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tony. Are you enjoying the conference? So a very nice normal dialogue there. Did you get the 6 words correct? Well done if you did. So hopefully what you noticed there is that they were showing interest. So notice how asking questions and showing interest are an important part of meeting someone for the first time. It's polite and it helps to build rapport, to build that relationship. If you're just giving very short answers and you're not showing any interest, you're not asking questions, it doesn't create a very positive first impression. So we're going to do this together. I'm going to show you a sentence that imagine I have said to you. How could you respond to it? What could you say to show that you're interested in what I'm talking about? I work in finance. So think, if somebody said that to you, what follow-up question could you ask? How could you show that you are interested? Interesting. How did you get into that? So this question, how did you get into, means how did you start? How did you start in finance? How did you begin your career? Let's try another one. I'm based in Tokyo. So again, think of a nice follow-up question or a way you could show that you are interested. What's it like living there? I've always wanted to visit. So again, you're being very positive, saying you've always wanted to visit, and you're asking a nice question. What's it like to live in Tokyo? Okay, let's try one more. I've been working there for 5 years now. So if somebody says this to you, what question could you ask? You must enjoy your job. What did you do before? So again, now perhaps you're asking about different parts of the person's life. What did they do before they had this job? Maybe they were at university or college or school, or maybe they had a different type of career. Again, you can see that being positive, interesting, I've always wanted to visit, you must enjoy your job, and then using a follow-up question. How did you get into that? What's it like living there? What did you do before? These are all really easy techniques that you can use to show interest and to build rapport. So I'm just going to summarize for you some useful questions that you can ask when you're in the situation of meeting someone for the first time. How did you get into? And then put the area they're working in. How did you get into marketing? How did you get into finance? Remember, this means how did you start? Similar way, what attracted you to finance? What attracted you to sales? Meaning, why did you find this interesting? What was it that motivated you to take this job? Somebody lives in a different city, you can ask, what's it like living in Paris, Tokyo, Dubai? What's your background? Have you always been with the company? Moving on to more general questions, if people have travelled to the meeting, how was your journey? Did you have any difficulties finding the office? So some nice questions there when you're meeting someone for the first time and you want to build that important relationship with them. Okay, let's move on and let's think about some vocabulary for careers. So I've got some expressions here to describe your position in the company. Be in charge of, work with, be head of, be responsible for, run, and lead. Now, how do you think we use these words? What I'd like you to do is to pause the slide and see if you can make some sentences for me about yourself, thinking about you and your company, using these expressions. What are you in charge of? Who do you work with? Are you responsible for something? Do you run a project? Do you lead a team? Are you head of a department? So think about your position and pause the slide and make some sentences for me. Okay, so when you're learning vocabulary, if you make it relevant to you, you're more likely to remember it, and of course, you're more likely to be able to use it. Let's check an example paragraph using this vocabulary. Lewis runs the North American office and is in charge of sales. He is responsible for meeting his targets and leading the team to achieve their goals. He works closely with the account managers. He was head of the team that successfully negotiated a lucrative contract last year. So again, seeing the vocabulary in context gives you a much clearer idea of how to use it. Okay, let's think about location. Again, 6 expressions: leave, change, move to, relocate, be transferred to, be reassigned. Again, same idea. Pause the slide and think how you can apply these verbs to your career, to your career path, maybe where you are now. Okay, let's check some answers together. Sue has just left the Taipei office because she requested to be transferred to Kuala Lumpur to be closer to her family. She has been reassigned to a new team. Sue said that relocating was a bit stressful, but overall she is happy that she has changed country and moved to Malaysia. Okay, so maybe this is a similar situation. Maybe you've had to relocate to be transferred within your company to a different, doesn't have to be a different country. It could be a different office or a different department within the same office. Okay, and the final group of vocabulary, let's have a look at changes. So we're going to have a look at expressions for changes: take over from, leave, retire, be promoted, appoint, change, be made redundant, resign or quit, and be fired. So lots of expressions here. So let's have a look at the example together. When Marcus retired last year and left the company, Abdullah took over from him and was promoted to the position of CFO. It was a period of turmoil and many changes happened. Several team members chose to resign, and one of the account managers was fired for filing false reports. Abdullah was able to appoint trusted staff to key positions, and they were pleased to change roles. Due to the downturn in sales, Abdullah predicts that some less profitable offices will have to close, and the staff will unfortunately be made redundant. So have a look at the vocabulary in context. Can you relate to any of this? Hopefully in a positive way. Maybe you've been promoted or been appointed to a new position. Okay, well, there are a lot of expressions there that have very, very similar meanings. What's the difference? Be in charge of, be head of, and be responsible for. Pause the slide a moment. What's the difference? Well, they are all very, very similar because each of these means that you are leading something. The difference in use would be dependent on what you're leading. For example, you can be in charge of something that may be quite small. It doesn't have to be something big. You can be in charge of a small project. But if you're talking about being head of, then you're head of people. You're head of a team, you're head of a department, maybe you're head of a country. Again, be responsible for can be used in many different levels. So I'm responsible for this report, or I'm responsible for global sales. So the scale of responsibility can be very different. What about relocate, move, and be transferred to? Again, really, really similar. Move is obviously a more general word, a much more common word to use in a generic way. Relocate to a different city, to a different country. Be transferred. Well, you can be transferred within your office. I've transferred from Team A to Team B. It doesn't have to be a country move. Be made redundant, resign or quit, and be fired. What do you think? Well, these are very different. Whereas the first two groups are very similar, these are very, very different, and it's important to use the correct one. So if you are made redundant, it means you lost your job, but it wasn't your fault. Maybe your company relocated and you didn't want to go. Maybe due to financial circumstances beyond your control, your company downsized and didn't need so many staff. The point here is that it's out of your control. It's not your fault. To resign or to quit, resign is more formal than quit, but this means it's your choice, your decision to leave your job. And this is a very normal thing. When you change companies, you have to resign from one company in order to start at the next. Be fired is when you have done something very seriously wrong. So if you remember on the previous slide, we had the example of somebody filing false reports and they were fired. So this on a CV would obviously be very negative. Well done. Okay, let's move to the final part of the lesson. Career paths. What advice would you give to someone who wants to climb the career ladder in your field? So the image here, I think, shows very nicely climbing the career ladder. It's expressing the idea that when you start work, when you start your working life, you take a junior position and then perhaps you want to move up. You want to be promoted to the next level, then to the next level. Sometimes people take a side step. Maybe you take a sabbatical, take some time out, try a different job. There are many different career paths you can take. But if you use this expression to climb the career ladder, it does mean to move upwards, to be promoted. How do you understand the expression glass ceiling? So if you've been reading business magazines, maybe you've come across the expression glass ceiling. How do you understand this? Okay, well, a glass ceiling is an invisible barrier to progression. So maybe you've experienced this, you're in a company and you know that you will not be promoted any further for an undisclosed reason. This is a glass ceiling. And typically this would happen with minority groups. Perhaps you feel there's an element of discrimination. And depending on what country you are in and the employment laws of that country, depends on what you can do about it. For example, in the UK, it's illegal to discriminate against somebody for certain characteristics. And if you feel that one of these is the reason why you haven't been promoted, why you aren't progressing, then you can take your company to a tribunal. But this glass ceiling, if you imagine a glass ceiling, it's like an invisible barrier to moving up. Have you ever had a dead-end job? Well, firstly, what do we mean by dead end? Normally, this is used in a road or street sense. What does dead end mean? Think about if you're driving and you see a sign in the street saying dead end, it means you can't go any further. The road stops here. So a dead-end job means exactly that, a job that's not going anywhere. Very different to a glass ceiling, because glass ceiling is a barrier that's stopping you. But a dead-end job is just a job perhaps where there is nowhere to move to. And perhaps you have experienced this in your career. Okay, number 4. Do you think that nowadays it's less common to work a traditional 9-to-5 job? So in the past, years ago, we talked about a 9-to-5, typically starting work at 9, finishing at 5. Things have changed a lot. People work from home, people have flexible working, people can work as we are with a computer from anywhere in the world at any time. Do you think this is having an impact on the traditional 9-to-5 job? Okay, let's think about you and your country. Is it common for people to change jobs in your country? And again, this can be very cultural. In some cultures, it's seen as a positive thing for people to change jobs every so many years, because why do you think? Well, it shows that people have skills of adapting. They can take different positives from different companies. It gives them more experience. But in some cultures, it's seen as a negative thing because perhaps it's seen that you aren't loyal to your company. What's it like where you are? Which leads on to the next question. What do you think is an ideal amount of time to stay at a company? Think about where you are. How long have you worked in your current job? How long are you planning on staying? Do you think that a university degree still holds value in your country? Or is it better to enter the job market as soon as possible? Again, this could be something that is changing. Some people now believe it's better to start work, to learn on the job. Maybe you have apprentice schemes in your country where you take school leavers and people can learn and work at the same time. So they might attend some college course, but they're also working and earning money. And the last question. What types of businesses and jobs are there now that we did not have 20 years ago? Again, a big part of this will be technology. Look at what we're doing, for example. Although teaching obviously existed, it was in a much different format. This is great because I'm here in the UK talking to you in a very global way. So people can access lessons wherever and whenever they like. So perhaps it's not just jobs that are changing, but the way that we do these jobs. These questions are very interesting, but also very useful if you're studying for an exam such as IELTS. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope to see you next time for lesson 58, where we will be talking about relative clauses again. So this will be the second of the 2 grammar-based lessons on relative clauses, and I hope to see you then.